And you've also spent time, as well as kind of building your own startup, you've also spent time working with larger firms, like I mentioned in the intro, Uber, Spotify, and companies like that. What have you learned in your time working with larger companies, and what was different?
Right. Yeah, certainly very different. Very different. I think it depends on what you contrast them with. I think in the past, I've usually contrasted these firms to academia.
Okay.
And there, I think the contrast is that, well, at these firms, they don't care so much about what is the fancy technique for doing something. They want you to do something that makes them money. That's what they care about. So sort of coming from academia, where it's like, oh, we want to invent this new cool method that uses all of these bells and whistles.
Yeah.
But then you come to these companies and they're like, we don't care about the bells and the whistles. We care about you providing us with something that makes money. That is a very sort of clear, stark contrast. And I guess I'd even say that sort of a startup is even further along that route, where it's like, just make it work. Like, just put things together and make it work, and get the machine running. Is sort of really the mentality at a startup. Whereas these companies, there's at least a bit more of this overarching structure where you have your role in the company and you're doing your part of the machinery, and that has to be really nice.
Sure. And do you like that way of working in a larger firm? Is that something that you like, or would you prefer to be working in a bit more of a dynamic startup environment? Or what do you like?
Right. Well, there's pros and cons. I think at a firm like that, you can get to focus much more. So I've been doing a lot of machine learning type things. If you're doing machine learning, you can focus much more on the actual machine learning if you're at a firm like that. If you're doing machine learning at a startup, you're going to have to do a lot of the dirty work yourself. You're going to have to build all of those pipelines, clean all of that data, do everything yourself. Whereas at a larger firm, you can focus on whatever you're specialized in. I think that's a very big difference.
Sure. Yeah. Sorry, carry on. I think you were just about to...
No, I'm not entirely sure which one I like better. I think they really both have their charms. And I think I personally am leaning a bit more towards having a bit more of a holistic perspective and trying to piece everything together, rather than just focusing on one thing. But yeah, pros and cons.
Sure. Can you go into a bit more detail? Like, what are the kind of pros and cons of kind of being in a startup compared to a large firm?
Right. Well, one thing, especially if you're in tech, is that obviously it's much more cushy at these big companies. Like, you have your salary, you have your free food and massage chairs or whatever it is you want, and that's obviously nice and it's comfortable.
Is it also like less risky? Does it feel less risky?
100%. Yeah. I mean, at some startups, or most startups, you get stock options still, right? Like at these very large startups, like Uber and Spotify, or which are now not in startups anymore. You still get stock options, right? But the potential upside to those options they're not that large. Like, you're not going to earn a shit ton of money on those options. So you're definitely taking less risk. You're definitely earning more money right now. But you also have you don't have this sort of potential huge upside in the future. And you also, like, I think a big thing for me and a big thing for a lot of people is just the lack of ownership. Like, at a startup, you really feel ownership of what you're building, and you're making something it's a product for other people, but the benefits from that is probably going to go to you or the people around you. And at one of these big firms, you're just a clog in the machinery, and you're not really benefiting. If you do twice as good of a job, you are probably getting less than twice as much value. Whereas at a startup, if you do twice as good of a job, you're probably going to get more than twice as much value out of it. So there's like this very different sort of dynamic to the value of your work in these scenarios.
Sure. So then, is it a case of almost like balancing all those pros of it against the kind of comfort of being in a big firm, the less risk that it comes with it as well. Is that almost the decision you're making?
Yeah, most definitely. And well, I think also, and to be fair, a lot of these big firms have a lot of interesting problems as well. Like a lot of people
Sure. Yeah.
don't want to do all the dirty work. Like they want to focus on some specific task. Like they want to optimize some algorithm or provide better ads or whatever they want to do, and they can just focus on that then and do their thing. And you can't really do that at a startup. At a startup, you have to have a much broader perspective and do a lot of the different things that are required.